Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. So, like Betsy said, I'm a pediatrician at Children's Physicians Dundee. I'm also a parent. I have two daughters who are 5 and 2. So this topic is sort of directed at myself at this time too. And I promise you, I survived it once. Like I said, my oldest one is 5, and I'm in the middle. My youngest is 2.5. So I'm halfway through this second year of her life. So I'm surviving it again. So it can be done. Um, and we're calling this talk Surviving the Trying Twos, not the Terrible Twos, because I really don't think 2 is terrible, and it certainly doesn't have to be terrible. And I promise you, in a few years, you'll look back and say, I wish I could have this kid go back and be a toddler again, because it is so much fun, and it goes so fast. So the goal of this is to kind of go through some of the things about toddlers, 1-year-olds, 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, that can be really frustrating, and help us figure out why these things are so frustrating, why they get frustrated, and how to get through it so that everybody can really enjoy themselves, moms and dads and kids alike. So why does 2 have such a bad reputation? You don't really hear people talk about the terrible ones. Some people talk about 3 a little bit. I've heard a few parents say, 3 is worse than 2. Why didn't anybody say this? You know, everybody says the terrible 2s. And I think part of it is psychological on the part of the parents. When you have a child who's 1, I think you still think of them as a baby. And as soon as they turn 2, we expect them to grow up. There's really nothing different between being 1 year and 11 months old and 2 years old in their mind. But in our mind, you hit that age, 2, and say, okay, now I have a kid. I don't have a baby anymore. And so we expect a light switch to flip and their behavior to change overnight. And that's just not the way that it works. There's a lot of things that happen during the first and second year of life, and a lot of changes these kids go through. And a lot of these changes are what make 2-year-olds so challenging. They start to walk and run and jump and squat, which means that they can get their hands on a lot more things. They can get from point A to point B a lot more quickly. And it means that we have to be on our toes a lot more in order to keep up with them. They learn to push and pull and fill things up and then dump that thing out, which is a lot of times a cup of water, or maybe milk, or something even worse on your living room carpet. And these are all just things that they're learning how to do. They can open drawers and cabinets, which creates a lot more new challenges because things that before were hidden and not really accessible to them are now things that they can get into. They can go up and down the stairs, so they're a lot more difficult to contain. You can't really keep them on one level like you could before. They will get around and get from place to place. They can climb up and down on furniture, and they don't care if it's something that's intended to be climbed on or not. And that gives them a lot more access too. So when they see a chair sitting there, they don't see a chair as a chair to sit in. They see it as a ladder. If I stand on top of the chair, what can I now reach that I couldn't reach before? So you have to think about all those things. They can scribble, and that's a lot of fun if they're scribbling in a coloring book or on a piece of paper. It can also be a bit challenging if they find a crayon or a container of lipstick or whatever the case may be and scribble all over your walls. And your hardwood floor in your kitchen, which is what my 2-year-old did recently with one of those nail polish pens that's intended to make little designs on your fingernails, which by the way does come off of hardwood. So they can throw a ball, they can kick a ball, they can throw and kick things that look like a ball or aren't a ball at all and aren't intended to be thrown. So this makes them very, very challenging. Keep in mind all these things that they can do and we would rather that they not do, they don't inherently know that. They don't know that a bowl that to them sort of looks like a ball isn't meant to be thrown. To them, they just see an object and something that they're capable of doing and can try. They start to play alongside of others, which is really, really fun. When they're around kids their own age, they'll start to do a little bit of interaction, mostly still playing by themselves, but they'll play next to the child. So they don't engage in a lot of pretend play together. You don't typically see 2-year-olds playing make-believe together, but they'll play make-believe next to each other. They start to imitate everything, and this is another situation where you have to be really, really careful because they are watching everything that you do, and they will start to imitate things that you say or actions that you've displayed in front of them, and it seems like they never remember the good stuff. It's always the stuff that you wish you hadn't said or done in front of them, that it's too late to take back, that they remember. And then they don't repeat the behavior right away. They wait until you're, at the middle of a holiday dinner or something, and then those words come out or those things come out, and you say, that was 3 months ago. I really thought they didn't hear me because they haven't repeated it, and then it comes out. So they're very affectionate at this age, and that can be a lot of fun, but they're also really, really emotional, and they can get very aggressive, very possessive, usually of time and attention, and they're extremely, extremely persistent. 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds will ask a question 800 times in a row until you answer it. And sometimes, even if you answer it, they'll continue to ask the question until they get the answer that they want. They'll ask you what color the grass is, and you'll say green. They'll ask again, you'll say green. They'll ask again, you'll say green. They ask again, you say blue, and they stop asking the question. They will really, really push, and that's why they can be very, very fun, but also very, very frustrating. This is a time when their communication skills are really starting to expand and explode, which again makes them a lot of fun, but also very challenging. They're starting to speak in sentences at this age, and this happens at a different rate for every child. So I always caution parents against comparing their own toddler to other toddlers that they are around, especially in terms of speech, because every child is different. A milestone for age 2 is that children should be putting together 2-word phrases. That's really a true milestone. So I go, do that, what's that, want that. But you'll meet 2-year-olds who are speaking fluently in sentences. And so, that's those 2-year-olds that are speaking in sentences, I don't want to say that they're abnormal. They're not abnormal, but they're certainly on the upper end of what's normal for that age. So if you are in a play group with a bunch of other kids your age and you feel like yours is not saying nearly as much as some of the others, don't feel bad about that. Your kid's probably normal. And the variety of what kids do at this age is so, so different. But it's also a reason that they commonly get frustrated around this age, because they have a lot that they want to say. They have a lot that they'd love to be able to say, but sometimes they have a really difficult time expressing that. They repeat a lot of words, and they do a lot of pointing. So if there's something that they want and they can't quite get the word out, they'll do a lot of pointing. So you have to kind of have eyes on them when they're trying to have a conversation with you. They're starting to learn their body parts, and they are capable of following simple instructions. Now, that doesn't mean that they always do, but they're capable of it. Speech at age 2 is usually about 50% intelligible. And the important part to remember about that is that means it's 50% unintelligible. So about 50% of what 2-year-olds say, we can't understand. And that's unintelligible to the parent. And that leads to a lot of frustrations for 2-year-olds too, because they really think that they're telling you exactly what it is that they want, but you hear about 2 words in that whole sentence that are understandable, and it makes it frustrating on both ends. They get very frustrated and tend to use a lot of nonverbal communication. And it's not always the most polite or pleasant nonverbal communication, but they'll do whatever it takes to get their point across. Safety is a big concern for toddlers this age. They should still be in a car seat. It becomes a little bit more difficult sometimes at age 1.5, 2.5, because they start to become capable of unclipping the little clip on the front of their car seat and opening it. Some of them can even unclip the latches on the lower part of the car seat. It's great if they can clip them together themselves when you get them in the car, but it becomes a little bit more difficult if you're driving down the street and you realize that now your 2-year-old has gotten out of their car seat. So be careful with that. I would caution against teaching them to do that. It is helpful when you get into the car, but you'll regret it 15 miles down the road, especially if you're on the middle of the interstate and it's hard to pull over. Make sure that locks are working and are always locked on the home, even in the day. I think that's a difficult thing to remember, but something you have to start remembering to do with these little ones, because they will get out the door before you even realize that they've left the room that they're in. And there's all kinds of different lock features that are available for doors in your homes. They have child safety locks on sliding doors, so that in addition to just flipping the sliding door lock, there's a button you push on the bottom. That took my 2-year-old, I think, 2 times of watching me do that to figure out how to do it. So now I'm back to square one. I've got to figure out some other way to keep that sliding glass door locked. So the other thing about that is, remember, they learn quickly. So if there's something you don't want them to do, don't do it in front of them. Child-proofing your house gets more and more difficult as the child gets older, because again, they climb on things, they can open things, they can get into everything. You want to make sure that things that are really, really dangerous for them to have access to are locked up and put in a place where they cannot get to them. Medicines, chemicals should be either in a locked cabinet or up high enough that they wouldn't have any access to them. Medications should be kept in their original containers that are child-proof, sometimes adult-proof, so that if they do get a hold of something, they can't get it open. Keep poison control phone number readily available on your refrigerator for yourself or for a babysitter, because occasionally this does come up. Watch for things that are choking hazards. I think this is tougher, especially if you have an older child, then you have little toys around, and then you have a younger one that's running around too. But you want to be really, really cautious that anything that's small enough for them to choke on be either put up or in a separate area of the house. A good rule of thumb is, if you have a toilet paper roll and a toy, or a small part from a toy can fit through that toilet paper roll, that's a choking hazard. That works well, that example works well if you have older kids and then you have a toddler around. I've had my 5-year-old kill hours in a day passing her little toys through a toilet paper roll when she's cleaning, and saying, these are things that are unsafe and these have to be in your room, these are only for you. It's amazing how she will try every single Barbie doll shoe, even though they're all the same size. Put all of them through. So that's a good way to kill some time too. Make sure smoke and carbon monoxide detectors in your home are in working order, and that's just a good thing to remember to do once a year. It's often suggested that you do that on a holiday, that be your thing. I know that could be your Halloween thing that you do every year on Halloween, is check your smoke and carbon monoxide detectors and make sure they're still working. I have no idea where the carbon monoxide detector in my house is, but somebody in your home hopefully knows where that stuff is and can check it. Also important to check your hot water heater. We recommend this even for infants, that you check the settings on your hot water heater and make sure that they're not too high. But it becomes more and more important as the children get old enough to actually turn the water on themselves, because they can step up to the sink and flip that water on and turn it to hot before you have a chance to get into the bathroom that you've heard they've started the water. So you want to make sure that your hot water heater is not set too high, so that's not a burn risk. Yeah. You should have it set to 110 degrees or less. Again, these kids this age require constant supervision. So it's always easy, if they're sitting and they're occupied, you think you can sneak out for a few minutes, and that's when you come back and there's lipstick all over your walls. That's happened to me many times. I think, okay, I've got 30 seconds, I'm just going to run in the other room. I don't know where this stuff comes from in the middle of the afternoon, but it happens. Again, make sure that your inside is safe and also your outside. If your children are going to be in the backyard alone at all, you need to have a fence and a gate, and make sure the gate's locked and in working order. Feeding is a struggle with toddlers. It's I think probably one of the most common problems that I encounter in my practice that people have a lot of questions about. It never seems like kids this age are eating enough. That's a really common concern for parents for 2- and 3-year-olds, because they're often really, really picky. Toddlers need usually 3 meals a day and 2 snacks. They can't get by on just 3 meals a day. They can't eat enough at one time to sustain them for the whole afternoon. So make sure that you're offering them a couple of healthy snacks during the day. Avoid food fights, which essentially means avoid spending hours and hours arguing over getting them to eat a food that you know they don't like and they're not going to eat. And they've shown disapproval for that food on a couple of different occasions. Don't waste your time. Just move on. Encourage healthy eating habits, and the best way that you can do that is by modeling that yourself. If you're trying to get them to eat vegetables and fruits and lean meats for dinner, but then at the same time you're eating a hamburger and French fries, that's a difficult thing for them to understand why things should be different. So if you want them to eat healthy foods, you're going to have to eat healthy foods too. And remember that toddlers will eat when they're hungry. So if you're offering them a meal and they are really, really not interested, they probably really aren't that hungry. If they've taken a few bites and they act like they're done, they're probably done. It is always tough for us to figure out what's the right portion for a toddler. And they really don't need that much. A few tablespoons might be a meal for them. And so if they're pushing food away, they probably aren't hungry. If they take a few bites at a meal and then say they're done, and then an hour later are requesting a snack, they don't get a snack. They get a snack at snack time, and then they learn. They learn that when the food's available, when it's mealtime, you eat, and you don't graze all afternoon long. Food lags are very common this age. They often desire only a few foods at a time. So for every single meal, they want macaroni and cheese and applesauce or whatever the case may be. And they'll go through a period where that's what they want to eat, sometimes even breakfast, lunch, and dinner for 2 weeks. And then one day you decide to make them their favorite meal that they've asked for every day for 2 weeks, and they want nothing to do with it. They push it away, they refuse to eat it. So it can be very, very frustrating. The good news is, if they eat the same meal for lunch and dinner every day for 2 weeks, it does not matter. That is, as long as it's relatively healthy food that they're eating, it doesn't matter if it's the same fruit or the same vegetable at every meal. Now, we want to offer them variety and to get them interested in eating variety because we want to eat variety, and we don't want to have to eat the same meal every meal for the rest of their lives. But if they, for 1 week, the only thing they eat is applesauce, they'll be okay. They also change their minds a lot. So if you ask a 2-year-old what they want for lunch and make exactly what they say, chances are, by the time you've got it made, they don't want that anymore. They're going to want something different. Keep in mind, you are not a short order cook. It's not your job to make them item after item after item until they decide that they're satisfied with what you made them and decide to eat it. I think if they make the choice and you make it for them and you put it in front of them and they don't want it, that's fine. The meal's over. They'll be hungry when snack time gets here, and they'll learn. They'll learn to eat the things that are put in front of them, and they learn that mealtime is mealtime. Now, if you make something for dinner and you offer it to them that you made for dinner for the whole family, knowing in the back of your mind there's probably a really good chance they're not going to eat this, and you ask them if they'd like something else and they say, yeah, I want a peanut butter and jelly, I think it's okay to offer them one additional choice. But again, that's the last choice. You're not going to make them 8 things. You got to sit down. You deserve to at least make an attempt to eat your own meal while it's hot. So you don't have to make them 1,000 things. If you make your meals interesting, if they're colorful, if not everything on the plate is yellow or not everything is green, they'll be more interested in that. Different textures, dips, all those kinds of things are enticing to toddlers. Be very cautious of things that are choking hazards. Hot dogs are okay to feed to them, but you need to cut them up. And they need to be cut lengthwise and then into pieces. You don't want round, whole pieces of hot dog. Raw carrots and celery, again, are a choking hazard. Peanut butter is okay, but it should be a thin layer spread on bread or a cracker. A big glob of peanut butter is hard even for an adult to swallow sometimes, so be cautious of that with little ones. Whole nuts, peanuts in particular, but any whole nuts can be a big concern for choking, and kids probably really shouldn't have whole nuts until they're 4 or 5 or 6 years old. Round, hard candies, gum, those are those things you want to avoid with toddlers. Whole grapes, same thing, those need to be cut up. Marshmallows, something that you might not think about. It seems like they would dissolve, but they really don't. They just kind of gum up, and so those are easy to choke on. At meal times, again, you want to make sure you're leading by example. So if you make a meal for your family and sit your children down to eat at the table and then take your meal in front of the television, that's not a very good example for the kids. They don't understand why then they aren't being allowed to eat in front of the TV too, because that's the example that they're seeing. Mealtime is a really good time to sit down as a family. And we always say talk about your day, but it really is true. It's a good time for everybody to talk a little bit about what they did during the day. Now, with a toddler, you're not going to have a lengthy conversation about their day. A lot of times, if you ask them what they did today, they'll tell you what they did 2 minutes ago, because that's all that they remember. But they really enjoy that time where the focus is on the family and the group and taking everything away. Put your cell phone away. Don't check Facebook. These are all things that I'm guilty of doing during meals too, and it's hard to make yourself do that, but it really is good in the long run if you make some special time for your kids during the day. Offer them everything that you've made for the meal. So if you made green beans, and this is going to be your 40th attempt at green beans with your 2-year-old, which sometimes that's the case, put those on their plate first. If they're really, really hungry, they might try it, especially if it's the only thing that's there. And you always want to continue to offer them everything, because you never know which day it's going to be. This is just why 2-year-olds are frustrating, that they're going to look around and go, oh, everybody else is eating this, and start eating it themselves. And sometimes you're just shocked and you look over and you go, they ate 4 green beans. This is a huge breakthrough, because I've offered them green beans every day for the last 5 weeks and they wouldn't touch them. And again, let the children get involved in the mealtime too, letting them help choose meals to have, and helping with preparation in any way that they can. If there's something that they can stir, if they can help set the table, put napkins on the table, they really enjoy doing that. And then they're probably more likely to have a positive reaction to that meal when it's served. Nap time, another struggle time for toddlers. Most toddlers take a nap every single day, or maybe even 2, and yet every single day they will put up a fight at nap time. They are oftentimes just so tired that that's why they're choosing to put up that fight, which is why they're taking a nap. But again, trying to reason with them at that point in time is difficult. So the best thing probably to do is have a regular routine. For most toddlers, they are going to go down for a nap sometime after lunch. So it's probably you do your lunch, whatever your routine is after lunch, and then nap time. And it's good to give them a warning. So instead of saying, okay, now it's time for a nap, put down your toys, we're going to go take a nap, it's better to say, you have a few minutes, you can play with one more thing, or we can read one more book, and then it's nap time. They do better if they have a little bit of a warning. Naps are best in a room that's quiet and dark. And remember, as your toddler gets older, they are going to come to a point where they don't need to take a nap anymore, but they still probably benefit from some kind of just chill time where they have quiet time alone in their room in the dark. So if your nap time is from 1:30 till 3 each day, or 1:30 till 2:30, or whatever it is for your child, and they're all of a sudden you're putting them in there and they're not going to sleep, that's okay. Leave them in the room from 1:30 to 3 like you normally would. And then if they've been in there for an hour and a half and they haven't fallen asleep, they probably aren't tired, and they can come out and go about the rest of their day. You don't want to push that nap further and further back, struggling with them, trying to get them to go to sleep. It's okay to just have that quiet time. Most of the time they'll fall asleep if you leave them on their own for long enough. Bedtime, same thing. This is probably even more of a struggle for toddlers than nap. Bedtime should be at the same time each night and with a routine that leads up to it. So toothbrushing, reading a story, so that helps prepare them. They know when that sequence of events starts that bedtime is coming. Kids will try every excuse in the book to get out of going to bed. And I've heard them all at my house and still do on a pretty regular basis in the evening. Um, my toe hurts, I need another drink. Sometimes my 2-year-old often sees flies in her bedroom, so that she needs me to come and, I guess, get out of the room before she can sleep. And it'll be one thing after another if you let it go on. And then they can go on for hours. I mean, these kids are amazing. They're tired. They'll keep coming out with excuse after excuse. Do not negotiate with them. Don't give in to their, every desire. I need my 12th drink of water. They aren't that thirsty. They'll be okay. They'll make it till the morning. Put them back in their bed. Continue to redirect them. You don't want to cave in, because the second you cave in, they learned. They learned that they can make you cave in, and now they're going to try even harder the next night, and they're not going to give up. So you don't want to give in if you can help it. Screen time. So television, but this also includes computer or iPad time spent on your iPhone, all these things in combinations for screen time. The American Academy of Pediatrics recommends absolutely no screen time for kids under the age of 2. So that would be no television or anything. Now, I'll tell you, I've broken that rule certainly a few times myself. But after the age of 2, we recommend at maximum 2 hours of screen time in a day. And I would say for a 2-year-old, I would try to limit that to 1 hour. Make sure you're watching the content of what they're watching. Even on Nick Jr. and the Disney Channel, you have to be cautious. The show that they're watching might be fine, but be careful of what's coming up. What's the next thing coming up on the Disney Channel, because not all of it's age appropriate for a toddler. Avoid having television as background noise. And I've been guilty of this many times myself, that you just don't turn it off. You're not really watching it anymore, but it's going in the background, because kids start to pick up on that and learn, and then they want to have that TV constantly running. And if you find yourself walking into the room and they're playing and the TV's on in the background, turn the TV off, because if they really don't need to have that constant background noise all the time. Make sure you lead by example. So you should also limit your own screen time during the day. If you turn off the TV and say, you guys should go outside and play, and then grab your iPad and your iPhone and go sit on the porch while they run around again, these are all things that I'm guilty of doing on multiple occasions. But you want to limit your own time too, and make sure that you're all just spending time together, being a family. The other thing about television, which is okay in small amounts if it's educational, is you should really try to make that time to enjoy together if you can. Now, I know sometimes it's nice, and I do this too, that you're going to say, okay, lunch is over. Why don't you go watch a show for a half an hour, and this is the only time I'm going to get today to clean my kitchen, do laundry, and that's okay. But at least some of the time, sit down with your child, and if you're going to have them watching television, watch it with them, and then you can talk about what's going on the program, and help them learn too. A lot of these educational programs are geared for kids that are a little bit older, and so toddlers can learn from them, but they need a little bit more help. They just need you to help explain. They're talking about words that start with A. And then you can use examples in your own house and kind of drag that lesson out. Toilet training, another big hurdle for toddlers. A very common question that I get at sometimes the 18-month checkup, and then a lot of times the 2-year checkup, is how will I know when my kid's ready to potty train? A lot of times parents, I think, around 18 months get really excited because it seems like your kid's going to be ready to potty train. And they start to show interest in the toilet, and they start to maybe even sit on the potty from time to time. And you think, great, I'm going to have a kid that potty trains really early. Most of those kids don't potty train early. Most kids go through that period around 18 to 19 months old where they're just getting really curious. They get interested in it, and then about a month later they go, moving on to the next thing. Don't care that much anymore. Occasionally a kid will potty train that early, but don't get your hopes up too high if that's your child. You can start potty training a toddler whenever you want. but it's my opinion that the majority of them are going to potty train when they're ready to potty train, no matter how long you've been working on it. So you want to watch for signs that they're ready, because otherwise you're going to fight it for 6 months too long, and the only person you're going to drive crazy is yourself, because the child really doesn't care. They don't care if they're in pull-ups and you're taking them to the toilet 8 times a day and they're not going, and then you're just changing the pull-up, or if they're still in diapers and running around. So some signs that they might be ready. If they're dry during naps, if your toddler still wets their diaper every single time they take a nap, they're probably not ready to potty train. They just can't hold their urine long enough to really be capable of doing it. They need to be able to follow simple instructions, walk and run well from a physical standpoint, and that they're showing some interest in the toilet. They need to be able to verbalize their needs, so speech is a part of this too, because they need to be able to tell you that they need to go. And then they need to be able to sit down for a few minutes at a time and have the patience to do that, which is probably one of the biggest hurdles in potty training. When you do think that they're ready, you want to have them sit on the potty frequently. So watch for cues that they may need to go. A lot of times for kids, this is jumping around or dancing around. Good times to try are after meals and after naps if they're dry, because that's a time when they'll often be successful. And make sure you give them lots and lots of praise for success. A big thing to avoid is punishing kids for having accidents at this age, because then they start to have a negative association with potty training altogether, and they'll pull back and they'll be scared, and then it's just a downward spiral. So lots and lots of praise, and simple things work. Sticker charts. Kids love sticker charts. They love stickers. They love that any little tiny element of reward. And if you use a sticker chart and then have some little bit bigger rewards along the way, which don't have to be, again, for 2-year-olds, it doesn't have to be anything huge. It can be, an extra 10 minutes of book reading time at night with you, or sitting down and playing a game. Maybe their big reward after they get 10 stickers is you get an ice cream cone. These don't have to, you don't have to take them out for dinner. It doesn't have to be anything that big. And when you are potty training and you've had some success, don't be afraid to try underwear. These are smart kids, and they know if they're in a pull-up or in a diaper. They know the difference, and they know that they can get away with it. So if they've had a lot of success and they're still in a diaper and they get busy playing or get involved in whatever they're doing, they may make the choice just to go in their pull-up because it's easier and they don't have to stop. And if they have underwear on, then they're going to have to consciously think about, is this a good decision? Discipline. Again, you want to really, really encourage good behavior. 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, even though we sometimes feel like they should, they don't really inherently know how to be good. They have to be taught, and this is something that happens over time. Make sure you model good behavior for them and give them lots of praise and rewards. And again, they aren't really inherently bad either. They just sometimes do things that are inappropriate, and so you have to model the things that they shouldn't be doing too. And occasionally it's okay to use punishment. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Common mistakes that people make with disciplining: reasoning or engaging in a long discussion with a 2-year-old. And I've caught myself in this many times, because you get caught up in the moment. You're just so irritated with something that they've done, and this is the 12th time you've done this. Don't you understand how mad this makes me? Don't you understand how disappointed I am? No, they don't. And you find yourself down at eye level with your 2-year-old trying to have a conversation, and you see their eyes going all around, and they're looking around you, or they're looking at their fingers, and you've lost it. This moment of negotiating is over. You can negotiate with them for about 3 seconds, and then they've moved on to the next thing. You clearly haven't, because you're still squatted down trying to negotiate with a 2-year-old. So, and that reasoning with them and having that discussion is only frustrating for you. In their mind, they're going, all right, I got her attention, And now she's down at eye level with me, and this is entertaining. I have no idea what she's talking about, but mom's talking kind of loud, and I don't know, this is entertaining for me. The other thing to avoid is remote consequences. So if your child's at daycare and you pick them up and you find out that they bit another child or that they got put in timeout, you can't take them home and put them in timeout, or take them home and try to reason with them about what happened. They probably don't even remember. But certainly they have no concept of a punishment that happens 6 hours after the fact. If there's going to be a consequence, it has to be right away after the behavior. Yelling for the sake of yelling. And again, I probably should just read through this talk that I'm giving every few days to remind myself of all the stuff not to do, because you find yourself getting caught up in doing this all the time. Your voice, you feel your blood pressure going up a little bit. I'm sure my face gets a little more red. You start yelling, and sometimes I look around, my kids aren't even paying attention. I'm yelling, sometimes my 5-year-old's laughing, and the 2-year-old's looking at me like I have 5 heads, and again, they don't care at all. It's sort of like a comedy routine for them. So I'm sure it's entertaining, but it's not very effective. Being inconsistent. You can't punish them for something one day and then let it go the next day and then expect them to not repeat the behavior. It becomes difficult sometimes because, unfortunately, they don't only do naughty things at home. They do naughty things when you're out in public or at dinner, at Target. Target is where my kids seem to have the most trouble. I don't know why. I think I'm just there a lot. But that's always where we run into trouble, is at the store. So you have to remind yourself if you really want to change your child's behavior, you have to be prepared to follow through on the things that you've said you would do, no matter where you are, no matter what the circumstances are. And again, just make sure that you're always following through. You don't make them empty promises or empty threats. If you tell them that if they do something, something's going to happen, then you need to make sure that happens. You want to encourage good behavior, and positive reinforcement works really, really well. Giving them praise for good behavior when you observe them doing good things is really, really beneficial. It's probably the hardest thing to remember to do, because when your children are behaving well, that's when you go get other stuff done. I mean, when they're sitting and playing nicely in your living room, that's when you're putting away laundry or vacuuming, or maybe finally just sitting down for the first time. But make an effort, and sometimes you just feel kind of silly doing it, but make an effort to say, wow, you're doing such a good job sitting on the floor playing with your toys and not throwing them at your sister. Or you're doing such a great job sitting at supper not throwing your food on the floor. Those kinds of things work. You feel kind of silly, but it works. And if you do it often enough, they start to really understand, gosh, if I act this way, I get lots of attention. And ultimately, that's really, really what they want, is your attention. And recognize when they've done something, when they followed through on something that you asked them to do. And again, that can be something really simple, like, can you pick your coat up off the floor and go hang it on your hook? And they do it, and they should get praised. When they do something that you've asked them to do and you give them no feedback, and they go, I don't know, I guess I just won't do it the next time. She didn't seem to care that much. Rewards, again, we talked a little bit about this, but they can be really, really simple for these kids. It may not seem like much of a reward to me, but for a 2-year-old, it's a huge reward. Be very, very cautious of making promises that you can't keep. And that can be something as simple as, if you go potty, then you can have a red popsicle, and then you don't have a red popsicle. They are devastated, and they're angry. So, and I use the red popsicle thing because I've done that one myself a few times, but check and make sure you have what you're offering as a reward. Or don't say, if you do this after dinner, we'll go for ice cream, and then after dinner realize we don't really have enough time to go for ice cream, probably shouldn't have said that, and then try to substitute something else, and they'll be mad, and they will make you pay for it. So, you want to limit bad behavior. And bad behavior can be a lot of things. Things that are just irritating and annoying is bad behavior and stuff that you don't want repeated. pouting, whining, arguing, certainly anything violent, and then temper tantrums. So things that are irritating and annoying, probably the best thing to do is just ignore them. And the same thing goes for temper tantrums. And kids this age know how to throw a tantrum. I don't know how they all know how to do this. And they all will lay down on the floor, bang their head against the floor, hands flailing, legs flailing. They're smart enough to know to not hit their head hard enough to hurt themselves, so you don't have to worry about that. And if they hit it a little bit too hard one time, they won't do it again. So you don't have to worry about, as long as they're in a reasonably safe place, like in your home, you don't really have to worry about them hurting themselves when they throw a tantrum, because they're smart. But you really, really want to just completely ignore that tantrum. And I will go as far as intentionally stepping across the child that's throwing the tantrum so that they can see that I'm ignoring them, with my back to them, walking out of the room, and just let the tantrum happen. Let the tantrum happen from start to finish. And usually, if you don't give them any attention, it won't last that long. Now, the hard part about that is when they throw a tantrum in public, right? You're at a restaurant, Target for me, again, where this always happens. If you can, still ignore the behavior. And now I'll have a disclaimer if you guys see me at Target and there's a 2-year-old on the floor behind me throwing a tantrum. I'm ignoring the behavior, and you really should try to, if you can. Now, sometimes there's nothing you can do. You know, you're at a restaurant or you're somewhere where it's really disruptive, and you just have to scoop them up and get them out to the car and then let them throw the tantrum in the car. But as best you can, try to ignore it. Why? Because all they're trying to achieve at that point is your attention. And attention to them, remember, is a reward. So if they're throwing a tantrum, and you get down on the floor with them and negotiate with them to try to get them to stop or try to figure out what's wrong, and you know they're just throwing a tantrum, then they win. They've won the battle because they got their reward. They got the attention. We would love to think that our 2- and 3-year-olds really, really care about us and love us, and they do. But they don't really care if you're mad. They don't really care if you're saddened by their behavior, as long as they're getting attention. It means the same thing to them if you're happy and giving them attention as it does if you're angry and giving them attention. So if you don't give them attention for the bad stuff that they do, then they don't get a reward. And over time, it doesn't happen overnight, unfortunately, but over time, they'll learn to stop doing it. And if you ignore the behavior altogether, then you may be able to eliminate it. The hard part with this sometimes is not reacting. You don't want to get angry. You also don't want to laugh. And to me, a lot of times that's the hardest part, because sometimes as the tantrum goes on and you're hearing them do it and watching them do it, some of the stuff they do is really funny. So if you find that you're gonna laugh, just turn your back at least so that they don't actually see you laughing at them, because you certainly don't want them to think that it's funny, although sometimes it kind of is. No should mean no, and you really want no to mean something to kids this age. You want a toddler that hears you scream no when they're about to run out into the street to stop. So you don't want to say no hundreds and hundreds of times over the course of the day, because then that word loses all meaning to them. It just becomes something, that's just something that mom says all the time. So use no. I mean, it's fine to use the word no, and you want them to know what that means, but use it for particularly egregious things that you really, really don't want them to repeat. So that, again, that time when you yell no because really something bad is about to happen, they hear that word no and they stop. Again, temper tantrums happen for a lot of reasons. And some of them here: attention, fear, excitement, stress, boredom, tired, pain, hungry, all these different things. Even if you know in your heart that they're throwing a tantrum because they're hungry, because it's an hour past dinner time, and you probably feel a little bit bad when you realize that that's the case. Okay, this is the 3rd tantrum they've had in a half an hour. I wonder maybe we should eat. I guess it is an hour and a half past dinner time, and you will feel that happens, and you'll feel bad. But still don't react differently to the tantrum. Don't get down and say, I'm sorry, I know you're hungry, because it's still not okay to throw a tantrum. And ultimately, you don't want a 15-year-old that lays down on the floor and throws a tantrum every time that they're hungry. So this is what you're trying to teach them. They can use words. They can tell you that they're hungry. They don't have to throw a tantrum to get their point across. And so again, don't make excuses for them, but you want to try to limit the amount of tantrums that they have in a day by avoiding these things if you can. So if you can see that there's a meltdown coming on, and you can get them out of the situation by feeding them or letting them take a nap, then that's a good thing to do if you can prevent these tantrums before they happen. And if you can see a tantrum coming on, and a lot of times in your own kid you can, and people on the outside might not be able to see it, but you just know what they look like right before they're about to have a meltdown. And you can redirect them away from that. That's an okay thing to do. It's okay if you're using timeouts to use timeout as a punishment for a tantrum that was, especially if it's a particularly horrible one. But you don't want to try to put them in timeout while they're having a tantrum. The timeout has to happen after the tantrum is over. Because trying to drag a kid that's kicking and screaming into the corner to sit for timeout, again, gives them their reward, because now they've got your attention. Also, sometimes we need to take a little parent timeout too. The kids this age misbehave a lot, but sometimes they can just be a little bit irritating. They ask 1,000 questions. They can't do anything for themselves, so you're constantly having to respond to them all day long, and sometimes you just need a little breather. It's okay to admit that. It's okay to do that. But sometimes when you get to that point in your day, if you step back and look, you realize you're probably overreacting. My child just asked me if I can read her a book, and I said no. And she asked me again, and I said no. And then you say, why am I saying, yeah, I guess I can read you a book. You kind of get into that habit of, I'm just saying no to everything because usually you don't ask me for anything reasonable. And then you step back and go, oh, wait, this is actually a reasonable request. Maybe I shouldn't say no. Maybe I should just, give in this time. Sometimes you feel like you need to step out of your house and scream, and occasionally maybe you do, and then go back and readdress the situation, and that's okay. Consequences for kids this age need to be very concrete, something that they can understand, and need to be immediate. So it's tough with a 2-year-old to say, if you don't do X, Y, or Z, next Saturday, we're not going to go to grandma's house for somebody's birthday party. Okay? They have no idea when next Saturday is. And so using that as a punishment probably won't work. So things need to be immediate. And also avoid punishments that you don't want to follow through with. And I am very guilty of this one. I will, especially with my older child, will say, if you do this one more time, then we're not going to the circus on Saturday. Well, yeah, we are going to the circus on Saturday because I already paid for the tickets. So probably don't use that one as you don't want to use things that you're not willing to follow through with yourself. And sometimes those things too are things that are going to punish yourself. You don't want to punish yourself when you're punishing them. So if it's something that you really wanted to do, don't use it as a punishment because you're probably not going to follow through with that punishment. Timeouts are one of the best punishments for kids this age if you do it correctly. I think there's an entire Parenting You talk coming up on how to do a timeout. So I'm just kind of going to go over this a little bit, recognizing that it can be an entire 1-hour topic in itself. But remember that timeouts need to be immediate. They have to closely follow whatever the behavior was that you want to eliminate. And timeouts can be carried out anywhere. So this is, again, where I come back to Target. I have put my kids in timeout at Target more times than I can possibly imagine. There are all kinds of places to have them sit in Target. Target's a great place to do timeout. They have aisles. If you find the right aisle where nobody hardly ever goes, there's certain aisles that they look like that nothing's off the shelf and people never shop in that aisle. Find one of those and set them down. Make sure that there's nothing around that they're going to grab off the lower shelves that they're going to be able to break. But you can do timeout anywhere. You can do timeout at a sporting event. You can do timeout at a restaurant. You can always find a place to do timeout. And especially if there's a specific behavior you've been working really, really hard to try to eliminate with timeout, You want to make sure you're following through no matter where you are. So even if it's inconvenient to you, and I think sometimes that's the hardest time to make yourself do timeout, is when you're in the middle of something that you really don't want to stop and take a break, but you need to and do that timeout. And the other aspect of that is everybody that's taking care of the child over the course of the day needs to be participating. So if your child goes to grandpa and grandma's during the day or to daycare, everybody needs to be on board with this and willing to do the timeout procedure. And then you just need to have the same consequence always. You should warn the kids once that if they continue, they're going to be in timeout. And if it continues, you do timeout. A designated place for timeouts is best in your house, a place that's quiet and boring and not right next to the toy basket. And generally speaking, we say 1 minute for each year of age for timeout. Some kids might need more time than that. A lot of times by the time they're 3 or 4, they've started to grasp that concept of timeout a little bit, and they know that they only have to sit there for 3 minutes and it's really not that long. You might need to increase the length of time because sometimes it's worth it to them. Oh, I only have to sit there for a couple minutes, so I'm just going to do it anyway and then go sit. And sometimes if you're just starting timeout with your 2-year-old, 2 minutes might be asking a lot. A success for them might be sitting in timeout for 30 seconds. So you can make adjustments for your own child. You only count the time for the timeout during which they're complying. So it doesn't count as part of their 2 minutes if they're coming out every 10 seconds to ask you if they can get out of timeout. If they're throwing a tantrum while they're in timeout, that doesn't count as time appropriately spent in timeout. It's okay if they're singing or smiling or talking to themselves. You can count that time. Make sure you don't give them any attention. If they leave, you just put them back. And don't try to sit down and lecture them or reason to them during the timeout. And then it's okay to do positive reinforcement after the timeout. So, thanking them or praising them for sitting in timeout and doing that appropriately. Yeah, I think it's good to tell them, what, and even before you send them, you're going to timeout because you did this, and then you can reinforce that afterwards. The other thing with difficult kids, some kids are really, really tough to get to do timeouts. You can practice timeout when they're not misbehaving. So say, okay, now we're going to practice doing a timeout, and then give them a reward for participating in a timeout that wasn't for misbehavior, was just a practice one. And a lot of kids will have to do that a few times so that they start to learn what the procedure for timeout is, because it's tougher to get them to do it for the first time when they're in the middle of a tantrum.
And do you want to go to timeout? And they say yes and just go sit themselves down.
Yeah, I have one of those too. My 2-year-old sometimes will put herself in time. She'll do something wrong and then just go put herself in timeout and kind of look at me like it was worth it. I'm still glad I did it. You probably need to increase the length of your timeout. And for some kids, maybe even up to 10 or 15 minutes if they are really, they're outsmarting you now at this point because they have learned timeout's really not that big of a deal. And it depends on the age of the child, because as the kids get a little bit older, sometimes the consequences have to become a little bit more, actually taking something away too. Try to give your toddler some control if you can. Let them choose their rewards and consequences. And there's a lot of power for them in choices. They feel like they have absolutely no control over their own life. But if you let them have just a little bit, a lot of times they'll respond to that really, really well. And I have this picture of apples and oranges here as an example, because I think, again, sometimes when you're in the middle of these toddler years and you're so used to making all the decisions for them and doing everything for them, and you're making lunch and they say, I don't want oranges, can I have apples? No. Why did I say no? There's absolutely nothing wrong with them eating an apple. They can have an apple instead of an orange. You kind of have to back yourself up and go, I guess actually that would be a completely appropriate substitution for an orange, and that was a good choice that you made, 2-year-old. You didn't ask if you could have candy instead of an orange, and you let them make that decision and move on, and then they feel really good about that. I got to make a decision, I made a good decision, and everybody's happy. Make sure that you really enjoy your toddlers. Again, this time goes way, way too fast, and you'll look back in a few years and remember how cute they were, and you won't probably, hopefully, remember how naughty they were. You'll remember it a little bit, but you'll mostly remember how cute they were and how fun they were. So make sure you're taking time to enjoy that too during this time. And then just some final thoughts. So I'll open it up for any questions if anybody has any. Yeah.
We're having a hard time with sleeping. Our son was a great sleeper till he was like 1, and then something just totally changed. Is that normal for this age? I mean, to the point like he'll go to bed and then he could get up anywhere from like 2 to 4 hours in the middle of the night and just not tired at all.
Just thinks he's ready to go. I slept and I'm ready. Sometimes you need to take a step back and look at your schedule during the day. Some kids that around this age that are having a tough time sleeping, if they're still taking 2 naps, are ready to go to just 1 nap, and that might help a little bit. But the other thing is a lot of that is sort of testing their boundaries and trying to see how much can I get away with even in the middle of the night. And if you cave into them night after night and let them come out because they seem wide awake, then they learn, I can do whatever I want. I can manipulate even in the middle of the night. And the middle of the night's the best time for them to try to manipulate because you're so tired. A lot of times you do give in during nighttime, and they figure that out. They're smart. So sometimes it's making some adjustments in your routine or looking at how long is your nap going in the afternoon. I think that's one place a lot of times where you get into trouble with toddlers is a lot of them are really shot after lunch. They're really, really tired, and if you let them, they'll sleep for 3 hours. But a lot of times that's too long and you need to cut that nap short. Wake them up after an hour and a half, and maybe they will sleep better at night. Anybody else? Yeah.
How long do you recommend giving them to eat for their meals, like lunch or dinner?
You know, I think generally speaking, they're probably going to eat, they should probably be able to complete a meal in 20 to 30 minutes. And after that, they're probably just playing. And so, you know, if you're sitting down as a family for a 20 to 30 minute meal, I'd say when you're done, they should probably be done too. Unless they're still rapidly eating that whole time. You know, if they're really eating the whole time, maybe they're still hungry.
Car seat need to be changed to a two-seat or?
So the infant carrier seats should be transitioned then to a upright car seat, and that transition can happen anytime. In fact, some of those upright car seats can start as early as 8 pounds. But we recommend that the kids stay rear facing in those car seats until they're 2, and then you can switch that car seat to forward facing. I recommend they stay in the 5-point harness as long as they are within the weight range for that seat because it's much, much safer to be in that 5-point restraint. And it's harder for them to get out. Kind of. Other questions? Yeah.
I guess you mentioned positive reinforcement a few different times. I guess, is there such thing as too much positive reinforcement?
No, I don't think so. I really don't. I mean, I again, at the end of the day, sometimes you feel a little bit goofy because you've done it so much. But if you're doing positive reinforcement for even the silliest little things, toddlers really respond to that. And the more positive reinforcement you give for good behaviors, the more it's apparent to them when they're not getting positive reinforcement, and the more apparent it is to them, I guess this is not something that I should, not something that I'm supposed to do because mom and dad aren't looking at me and nobody's talking to me and I'm being completely ignored while I'm over here, doing whatever this is. So I don't think you can do too much unless you drive yourself crazy.
Read, like, if you always say good job, repeatedly say that, then like the rest of their life they're always going to expect some type of praise, right? So that at some point do you cut that off?
Well, and maybe there is some truth to that, but I do think with these little kids at this toddler age, they learn so much by how you respond to them in situations. So again, but part of that too is you also have to be willing to carry out the part on the negative side. So they have to get both because they're not going to be getting, I guarantee you there's not going to be any 2-year-old in the world that if you're doing positive and negative reinforcement, it's getting positive reinforcement 24 hours a day. They're all going to get some of that negative too because they're all going to do stuff wrong.
With my son, we have a little dog and he likes to go try to sit on him or just open his mouth up and I tell him it's not right and since I've already told him and he knows, I'll take him to timeout in the room. And then as soon as he comes out, he goes and does it again. And sometimes he even looks at me like, I'm just.
What are you going to do now? I'm just going to keep doing
And I
it.
take him back, and I can take him back 10 times, and he'll just keep doing it. So, do you think like if I'm increasing the time, it needs to be by like a longer amount of time so that he notices a difference? Like if I just add 1 minute, do you think he's noticing that it's 1 minute?
Maybe not. I mean, you might want to increase the length of your timeout, at least for that particular offense, to something a little bit longer so that he feels the punishment a little bit more. That's tough with a little dog. Yeah.
What about, my son don't like being in the high chair. So in the high chair and he fights, he get right back out again.
How old is he?
He's at year and a half, over a year and a half.
That is a kind of a common time to start resisting that a little bit because they recognize that they're different than the rest of the family. You could try a booster seat buckled in, pushed up to the table, and see if he does better. If that's your biggest resistance, I'd probably just get rid of the high chair and just know that you're going to have to clean your table off more often. What's that?
We tried booster seat. We tried it.
Oh, and he still won't stay in the booster seat. He wants to get out of both. And then I'd use timeout. When he's being resistant to that, then I'd go back to, and 18 months old is okay to start doing timeout. 30 seconds probably as a victory. Yeah.
Back to nighttime, we have he's like 25 months old, or 2 years, and he will get up in the middle of the night, somewhere between midnight and 4 for like an hour, and want to be completely awake. We just keep putting him back to bed. He's in a big boy bed, so he'll come out and you can hear him come get us. We just keep putting him back to bed, but it's been like a solid 2 months of this. So, I mean, does it ever end, or is it just kind of...
It will. I have hope that it will end. I have a 2.5-year-old that still does this sometimes too. So I have hope that I think that it ends. But I mean, I think you do the right thing by putting them back. Again, look at your nap schedule a little bit and see, because I do think a lot of times when you have kids that are waking up in the middle of the night, there's a difference between they're waking up in the middle of the night crying or wanting you but they're still tired, or waking up in the middle of the night and they look like they're ready to roll. I mean, they think they've had a full night's sleep, and I think a lot of times those kids are napping a little too much during the day. Yeah.
I have a 19-month-old and he's in a big boy bed also. We gate him in his room.
Mm-hmm.
How long do you think that should last?
Until he's learned to not come out. Yeah, I think that's an effective way to keep it, just sort of like making the room. Yeah. Yeah, and it basically just makes their room into a big crib. So as long as the room is safe, and that's the caveat, because it's tough to make sure that there's nothing in that room that while they have free reign, they can't get into. So take a good look at the safety issues in the room. I always worry about dressers with drawers. They like to use those for ladders, and things can tip over and those kinds of things. But usually, yeah. It's just more for your sanity and so that you can sleep at night knowing that he's not wandering around the house. Yeah.
What do you recommend, like if they're waking up anywhere between like 12 and 4 and coming into your bed? Do you recommend just every time they want to, because she's 2.5 and she'll just want to wake up in the middle of the night. She'll still be tired.
Mm-hmm.
She just wants to come sleep in our bed. Do you recommend just taking her and putting her back in her?
Right back in bed. I think if you start giving in and letting them sleep in your bed, you're opening the door for having a 10-year-old that still wants to sleep in bed with you at night. And nobody, I mean, and it's hard because when they're 2.5, they're cute. And I mean, it's kind of fun to snuggle with them. And it's, yeah. You just got to put her right back in bed. Don't give in at all. She goes right back up to her room and right back in bed.
My son doesn't nap. He doesn't like to nap during the day. Every once in a while, he will be tired and he'll sleep. But do you think that it would get too often? I guess I don't know how I can get him started on napping for at least, an hour a day or something.
Well, I think a good place to start is at least having him be in his room and being quiet during that time. And that's because he's not napping. That'll be a process to get him back. But like I said, even for kids who don't nap, they benefit from some quiet time during the day. So do adults. I mean, it's always nice to take a little time to kind of let your mind stop racing. So maybe just start with that, with this just being quiet time, and it's spent quietly in your room in the dark. He'll probably over time start falling asleep during that time because he'll be bored if you don't have anything in there for him to get into and do.
Room for a timeout. So I guess I need to find a good place for that.
Yeah, and that's probably a good point too. She said she's been taking him to his bedroom for timeout. And then sometimes that does make a little bit of a negative, then they see nap time as a negative consequence. So that's probably a good point. I'd find a different place in your house to do timeout if you can.
Maybe start nap time like on the couch or something, and then find another place for timeout. And once everyone's not timeout anymore for a while, then try to have them nap in the room.
I'd probably just start nap time in the room and find another place for timeout and just be prepared to kind of fight that battle for a few days, just like everything else.
I have kind of a different kind of question, but with winter coming, we are always lacking for indoor cheap stuff to do that's age appropriate. Does anybody have good suggestions for that?
How old is your child? So I think 2 is a good age for starting to do some arts and crafts stuff. And that can be as messy or as not messy as basically you want it to be. Sometimes kind of fun things to do with kids this age are finger painting and those kinds of things. I have done that in the past with pudding, because then at least if they put their fingers in their mouth, they're not ingesting, even though it's non-toxic paint. That always makes me a little bit nervous, but that's kind of a fun thing to do. They love to color, and anything that they can do like that, those are good, fun indoor things. Games, they're starting to get to the point where you can play some simple games. I don't know, does anybody have any other ideas of great stuff they do indoors?
We do a lot of forts.
Yeah.
Like get every blanket in the house and make it a blankie fort is what he calls it. But
any like indoor playgrounds besides Westroads or suggestions like that?
There is an indoor playground at Mahoney Park. I don't know if you've ever, which is a little bit more of a jaunt, but that one's a lot of fun if anybody's looking for something fun to do for like a whole afternoon in the winter that's got the climbing tunnels and the ground is cushioned. That one's a lot of fun. Yeah, I think it's a couple dollars to get in or something like that.
We do a lot of memberships, like Fontenelle Forest and stuff, and then they'll have a lot of, they call it mud tides. It's like Monday through Wednesday where the kids can just go in the basement and play. And
Oh, and that's inside.
yeah, cool.
Children's Museum.
Children's Museum's a good one.
Even the zoo has
Lots of
indoor.
We have issues with bath time lately, like the last few weeks, just screaming bloody murder the entire time. If she even thinks that you're going upstairs to take a bath, I mean, no, leave my clothes on. Like, do you have any suggestions?
How old did you say?
Almost 27 months.
Have you tried a shower?
Terrified of the shower.
I was just going to say she might dislike the shower so much that she'd be willing to go back to the bath.
Try like the choice thing, right? Like, do you want to take a shower, take a bath? I mean, it's like no to everything.
Again, this is just another one of the frustrating things about 2-year-olds, because why do you all of a sudden hate taking a bath? I mean, nothing they do ever makes any sense. It's just that this is your new thing that you're going to do. This is your new fight that you're going to try to put up, and it's one that she can't win because obviously she has to bathe, right? You might try, I don't know, this new simple bath toy, something that might make it a little more exciting. I don't know if you've ever tried those color drops that you can toss in the bathtub. They have at Target. I don't work for Target, but it kind of seems like I do. They have them at lots of stores, but they're like color bath drops. You toss one in and it colors the water. My kids love those, and I use those for rewards. We don't do it every single night, but if they do something good, then I tell them they can put a color in the bathtub. There's 100 of them for $2 or something.
Or even a glow stick. I've used glow sticks. You'll put them in and then turn the light off just a little bit and it makes everything glow. So that's kind of fun.
Or anything to make it different.
They have markers too that they can draw on the, because we're having the same problem. And I just purchased the drops. But the markers that they can draw on the tub, and then it just
They don't
literally
stay.
like, nope, it goes right away. So that keeps them in there for a little bit.
Those things do help. I think they make it a little bit more fun.
I have a question back to potty training. I wasn't planning on potty training yet. She's almost 18 months old. But for like the last 3 weeks, I mean, she will throw a tantrum if I don't let her sit on the potty. Do I let her sit on it?
Absolutely. I would absolutely if they're showing any interest, I would let them sit on the potty. I think the most important thing with that is to make sure that for yourself, your expectation is not that she's going to be potty trained in a month. She might be. Yeah. And that's awesome. Like I said, I think it absolutely hurts nothing to put them on the potty when they're showing interest. Just don't let yourself be disappointed if she regresses a little bit in a few
Even if
weeks.
it's like 20 or 30 times a day. I'm with her. I mean, like, seriously, it's like, it's.
She just always wants to sit on there?
I mean, she'll eat and then I normally just sit her on there. But like, she'll be playing and then she'll pull me up to go to the bathroom.
Does she go?
She does sometimes. Like, a couple times a day she'll go.
I'd probably keep doing it. If she's going a couple times a day, I don't know that I'd do it 20 or 30 times, but yeah, I would maybe, let her go once an hour or something. And then you can say, just distract her with something else on those other times. But if she's having success, you don't want to hinder that.
I think we should take one more question, if there's one.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Thank you.